So today, I want to talk about just laws and my thoughts on those. It's going to take me a little bit of time to get wound up because I was thinking about this over the last hour and fighting the urge to start recording, but it seems like I do fairly good in the car, even though you see the steering wheel. So just laws. Been reading a lot of very odd stuff from the Second World War. One of the books I was reading that's not really relevant was the story of the German interrogator that was questioning, being very successful in gleaning information from Allied POWs, air crews that were shot down in Germany. Really good book so far. The one that I'm having a hard time with is Ordinary Men. It's a story of the 101st Reserve Police Battalion, and it was mostly just average people, average guys that were forced to do hideous things. So, but it really got me thinking about what defines a just law. And just to get myself spooled up, an unjust law, or a just law, is kind of a fallacy in my opinion, because you start getting into ethics, you start getting into morality, not as in mortality, but morality, what's right and wrong. And before I go into that, I jotted down a note that I wanted to write because Dave Bowman talked about this writer, John Dewey, and it got me doing a little bit of research on him. And I ended up picking up one of his books that I have sitting next to me, The Public and Its Problems. There was actually a very interesting point that he brought up early in the book, that the idea of philosophy is it's something I've always wrestled with as far as philosophy. Futile speculation is a companion of all philosophy, and that's what Dewey wrote. And in a way, that's kind of what I'm doing. It's mostly futile speculation. That's what pretty much all of us, anybody who writes on philosophy or current events or anything like that, it is basically futile speculation. It's futile to debate whether or not something is a just law and what the conditions are that require it to be violated, those laws to be violated. You know, why? What makes it just? What makes breaking it unjust in the eyes of the law, but just in the eyes of the individual? And the biggest problem is everything's contextual. It's contextual, not based just upon the situation, but the background of the individual who's making the decision. So, going back to Ordinary Men, it's proving to be a very difficult book. I knew this before I got into it. I knew this because I had read The Rape of Nanking by Iris Chang decades ago. Which goes to show how old I am. And it was a really difficult book for me to actually to power through, because it just becomes a repetition of atrocities over and over and over again. But here's the issue. On some level, those laws were just. Those laws that those men followed, the guidance from their superiors, the orders that were given, those were just. And they were, this is going to be just really, really a difficult topic for me to handle. Because we view those as unjust. Those acts that they ended up committing are atrocious. Atrocious. They're atrocities. It's just maddeningly evil. But they were laws. And it was up to the individual whether or not to carry those orders out. You hear a lot of people speculating nowadays about Amy Coney Barrett, about whether or not there's going to be a peaceful transition of power if our current president, Trump, loses the election. The other question is are people going to accept the decision or the outcome of the election? You know, what is that just for them? Is it just for people to go out and I'm not conflating these, don't misconstrue me. Is it just for people to go out and loot and burn and tear up things because they're what? They're outraged, they're protesting, it blows my mind where we're at today because of what people view as just. Is it just for people to censor? Is it just for people to incite hate speech? You know, it's really hard because we're bound by laws, and that's kind of what was going through my head earlier is the current laws that are in place are a participatory agreement between the people of a society and the framework of that society. It keeps us from breaking laws, it keeps us from doing whatever we want. And yeah, it's really hard for me to keep a coherent thought because I had so many different directions I wanted to go with this. But suffice to say, it's really going to be up to the individual. It's always going to be up to the individual determination. One of the things that I like about reading Dewey and reading Lippmann and Bernays is because they all discuss, they philosophize, they embark on futile speculation about the nature of opinion, about the nature of the individual within society and the responsibility of the society to the individual. Which all goes back to the framework of that society and the laws. And at what point do the individuals within a society determine that the laws are unjust and need to either be changed or broken? It's a weird time that we're in. And one of the biggest challenges I think that we have is that we are being accelerated through some seriously significant technological changes without the time. Kyle's getting busy. Without the time to process. One of the things that I've written about, either in passing or in comments or directly on my blog, is that the rate of change is entirely too fast. The rate of information is entirely too fast. And this is the foundation of the problem that we have. The changes that are happening now, we don't have the time to process as we did before in previous ages or in previous revolutions. The Industrial Revolution, the Iron Age, all of these things, yes, they were significant things, but they happened slow because they did not have the ability to transmit ideas, to communicate theories, to discuss and see what other societies, how other societies contended with those changes, or what the perils and pitfalls they experienced. So it's really interesting because very few people see this. You know, we're gonna get on YouTube. I'm gonna post this up on YouTube later, and it's garbled, non-linear, non-flowing mess that it is, with my steering wheel visible. And I'm gonna share this. And the neat thing about this is these ideas are gonna be available to anybody across the globe. That's fairly fascinating. But do we have the time? Do we have the ability to digest those changes? It's kind of like trying to eat a whole German chocolate cake all at once. Or in my case, because I just got a wonderful shipment of cider and donuts from Michigan. You don't try and eat all of that stuff all at once. You don't try and eat a full Thanksgiving meal in one sitting as fast as you can, but that's what we're doing, and we're feeling ill from it. We're getting indigestion. You know, we talk about, there's been a lot of talk about moral policing that's happening, you know, so with what's the phrase? I can't think, but it's on the tip of my tongue. Politically correct, yes. Politically correct. And the goalposts that we have to gauge what is and what is not politically correct has been shifting so much that people are just getting frustrated, and it's kind of robbing the validity of harmful words, the impact of harmful words. You know, you keep throwing words around over and over again. They're not going to have the same meaning. If everything is declared if everything is declared racist, then what is actually truly racist? If everything's decided to be hateful, what's hateful? You've diluted the meaning of those words. And that's the other thing too, is people don't understand. We have this ability to look at the effect around the globe with other cultures and see what errors they had. And with moral policing, one of the first things when I started hearing about the idea of morality policing in some of these bigger cities, about what is acceptable speech, what isn't acceptable speech, what is acceptable behavior, what's not. The first thing that I thought of was the Taliban in the 90s. The Taliban, they came into Afghanistan after the Afghan Civil War, after the Soviets left. That country was in one of the worst things that could happen, one of the worst situations that could happen. It was in a power vacuum. So the area was relatively lawless. The Taliban came in with promises of restoring order, as long as you followed their rules. And things were bad enough, people were desperate enough that they were willing to go along with it. Whatever you say, as long as you restore order. And it wasn't good. It should never be to that point where you are so desperate that you're willing to give up basic freedoms just for the sake of somebody coming in and providing order. And this kind of brings me back to where I was going earlier with ordinary men. You know, I'm reading about all these, like how they just treated people like cattle and herded them and cleared them out of areas and transported them to where they were going to be executed. And nobody did anything because I don't know. I really don't know. maybe the situation was that bad that they just gave up. I don't know. I cannot fathom why people would just be so compliant. It just boggles my mind. Because was it just? Was what did they justify it somehow in their minds, or did they just give up? I don't know. It's a really hard topic to broach, and I probably just seriously need to write it out, because I get on that and my mind just goes all over the place. And yes, I do have notes. Just 1 page of notes. And you notice I'm being safe. This all leads to this weird thing that I'm kind of working on, intellectual gentrification. You know, you're taking a time where people had more substantial thoughts. And I'm not saying that the people back in the 20s and 30s were much, much smarter. They were a lot more practical, and sometimes they weren't that smart, and other times they were. I mean, they created the foundation for a lot of things that we have now. I mean, you can't really compare the level of intelligence because it was a different time. But we didn't have the ability to shout down somebody in Des Moines, Iowa, or become friends with somebody in Dublin, Ireland, or agree with somebody in Silverdale, Washington. They didn't have that ability. We do. But yet we're getting into this emotional and intellectual gentrification, where the old structures that had beauty, that artisan quality of thought, that maybe I'm overly romanticizing, it's gone. And instead, you have this facade that makes it look, that gives you the impression of having quality or substance. A good example is those places like McDonald's or fast food places, when they open up in new areas, or when you get like a strip mall, they try and capture the local flavor. If you go into like Williamsburg or the Tidewater area, a lot of places will have that dark brick with light trim of the colonial era, but it's just a facade. It's implying that it's a lot older than it actually is, or that there's a lot more substance than there actually is. You have that with, these things drive me crazy when they pop up. These manufactured small town feel vibey things where it's not really, it's built from the ground up to look like an old quaint town, or with a corner market and all this other stuff, but it's not. It popped up within the last 5 years, but they try to give it that very weathered, very classy look. Well, the same thing's happening with our thoughts. We have all these tools available to broadcast our ideas all over the place. But a lot of times our ideas just end up to be crap. You can't really tell me that you can get substance out of, 140 characters for a tweet? That's insane. What's the point? So instead, now people are tweeting or just chaining tweets one after the other, where they have, I forgot the longest one I ended up reading was, I think, 14, 15 tweets all linked into one at 144 a pop. And it's just like, the intellectual gentrification is because people don't want to invest in the time. They don't want to invest in the process of arriving at something of quality, I think. So, I don't know. We're at a weird time, and it's weird enough that I'm actually recording my thoughts while I go to pick up my daughter on a phone in my truck, where you see more of the top than you see of anything else. It's a work in progress. That's all we are. That's all we can be, as a work in progress. So, keep working on yourself. Keep thinking. Keep reading. Keep watching.